Welcome, and may God richly bless your day and the entire week you have ahead of you. It is so good to have you here with us for this deep dive. I mean, imagine holding a secret that could completely dismantle the corrupt politicians who just ordered you to be tortured,
Oh, wow.
right? And choosing to just keep your mouth shut, enduring the agony until the absolute perfect moment to play that card. Because today, we are looking at a man who did exactly that. We're heading into what historians call Paul's second missionary journey.
Yeah, and it's a deeply complex web of Roman law, ancient economics, and this radical new faith.
Yeah,
It is really a phenomenal period to examine
it really is.
because we're dropping right into the time frame of, well, roughly 49 to 51 AD,
Hmm.
and the message of this newly formed Christian faith is expanding.
Right, it's leaving the East.
Exactly, leaving the East and preparing to cross over into Europe for the very first time. And what becomes immediately apparent is that this message is on a violent collision course with established local economies and, the strict, unyielding structures of the Roman Empire.
And, you would think a history-altering journey like this would begin with perfect cinematic harmony, but it actually starts with a bitter, messy fallout.
Yeah, a massive argument.
Right. Paul and Barnabas, who had been this inseparable team, they get into a massive fight over a young man named John Mark. Mark had apparently abandoned them on a previous dangerous trip.
Yeah, he bailed on them.
He did. And Barnabas wants to give him a second chance, but Paul draws a hard line and basically says, no way. The conflict gets so heated that they literally split up.
Which is such a striking historical detail, I think.
Oh.
It strips away the polished veneer we often put on these historical religious figures.
Oh, definitely.
Even the foundational leaders of the early church were navigating intense relational conflict, They didn't always achieve perfect unity.
But practically speaking, this disagreement resulted in two distinct traveling teams going out. Barnabas takes Mark to Cyprus, and Paul drafts a man named Silas, heading out by land, so they're covering twice the ground.
Right, exactly. And so Paul and Silas are traveling through the region, and they arrive in a city called Lystra.
Where they meet a young disciple named Timothy.
Yes. And Timothy's background is highly specific. He is the son of a Jewish mother who was a believer, but his father was Greek.
Right, and Paul decides he wants Timothy on the team. But, okay, let's unpack this right here, because there is a glaring contradiction that really makes no sense on the surface.
We talking about circumcision issue.
I am, because right before this journey, Paul was the main voice at the Jerusalem Council. He was fighting tooth and nail for the decree that Gentile converts do not need to be circumcised.
Yeah, they're literally carrying that decree with them to deliver to these cities.
Exactly. And yet, the very first thing Paul does when Timothy joins up is force him to be circumcised. I mean, I have to push back here. Isn't this just blazing hypocrisy?
It definitely looks like that on the surface.
Right. It looks like Paul is selling out the minute things get politically complicated.
It really does. But you have to separate theology from cultural strategy here.
Okay, how so?
Well, Timothy's Greek father was widely known in that specific region, and because Jewish identity was traced matrilineally, Timothy was considered Jewish. But because he was uncircumcised, he was entirely illegitimate in the eyes of the local Jewish community.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, if he walked into a local synagogue to preach, it would have created an immediate, insurmountable riot.
Okay, so this isn't about theological salvation at all, then.
Not at all.
This is like, I don't know, a modern diplomat putting on a conservative suit instead of a t-shirt before a high-stakes meeting. He's not doing it because it's a moral law. He's just removing a cultural stumbling block to get his foot in the door.
Precisely. Yeah, Paul wasn't abandoning his core conviction. He was adapting to his audience to ensure the message could actually be heard over the cultural noise.
A strategic, if painful, concession for access.
Exactly. It was all about access.
That reframes it completely.
Yeah.
So the newly expanded team pushes forward. They are traveling along the Via Sabas, which is this major Roman military road.
Yeah, and they're planning to hit the prosperous coastal cities in the province of Asia, places like Ephesus.
But then the historical record notes that the Holy Spirit, or the Spirit of Jesus, entirely blocks them from speaking there.
Which is such a fascinating mechanical question, right?
Yeah.
How exactly were they blocked?
Right, like, was it a physical illness,
Yeah.
impassable weather?
Or hostile local governments? Or just a profound, undeniable internal conviction? The text doesn't actually say.
Wow, okay.
But the result is a staggering divine no to what would have been the most logical, profitable route. I mean, human logic dictates you go to the most populated cultural centers.
Instead, this roadblock forces them into a massive, grueling detour. They pivot north toward Bithynia, and they're blocked again.
Yeah, so they end up walking all the way across the region to the Asian port city of Troas.
We are talking about a distance of roughly 400 miles on foot.
Entirely off their original plan. They must have been exhausted and completely confused about what to do next.
I can't even imagine. But there's a subtle but massive shift in the historical record right when they reach Troas.
Yes, the grammar suddenly shifts to the first-person plural.
Right. The text starts saying we, like we sought to go into Macedonia.
Yeah, the author of the text, Luke, steps out of the shadows and joins the narrative. He is suddenly traveling with them.
Oh, that's so interesting.
And it's right here in Troas that the confusion breaks. Paul has a vision in the night of a Macedonian man begging him to come across the sea and help them.
And they immediately recognize this as the direction they've been waiting for. They secure passage on a ship and sail straight into Philippi.
Marking the exact moment this faith officially enters the European continent.
Which is huge, and Philippi is a deeply strategic entry point, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It wasn't just a random city. It was a highly privileged Roman colony, populated heavily by retired military veterans.
Right, so it operated strictly under Roman law, proudly mirroring the culture of Rome itself.
It was so thoroughly Roman, in fact, that it lacked the basic demographic requirement for a Jewish synagogue.
Because that traditionally required at least 10 Jewish men.
Exactly.
So without a synagogue to serve as their normal starting point, Paul and his team head outside the city gates on the Sabbath. They go down to a local river, figuring people might be gathering there to pray.
And they meet a group of women, including a woman named Lydia.
Now, Lydia is a powerhouse. She is from a city called Thyatira, and she is a dealer of purple cloth.
Which tells us everything about her socioeconomic status. Thyatira was famous for producing this incredibly expensive purple dye.
Extracted drop by drop from sea snails, right?
Yes, it was the color of royalty and the extreme elite. So Lydia is moving high-end luxury goods. She's a wealthy, independent, international businesswoman.
But notice the mechanics of her conversion, because it doesn't credit Paul's rhetorical brilliance.
No, it doesn't. The record specifically notes that the divine opened her heart to pay attention.
Right, the human speaker just delivers the words. The actual illumination happens internally.
Exactly. She and her entire household are baptized, and she has the social capital and resources to insist that Paul's team move into her estate.
It's an incredibly peaceful, triumphant start. But of course, the peace shatters almost immediately.
Because of a young slave girl?
Yes, as they are walking to the place of prayer over the following days, they are stalked by this girl.
She is possessed by a spirit of divination. The original language links this to a python spirit,
Which in the ancient Greek world was directly associated with the Oracle of Delphi and the god Apollo.
Right, which means she is part of a massive ancient economy. People paid exorbitant amounts of money for fortunes and prophecies.
And her condition is being ruthlessly exploited by a syndicate of owners who are getting rich off her spiritual bondage.
Yeah, it's a tragic situation. And she just starts trailing Paul's team, screaming at the top of her lungs, "These men are servants of the Most High God who proclaim to you the way of salvation."
And she does this for days.
Days. And Paul eventually becomes completely aggravated, turns around, and commands the spirit to leave her in the name of Jesus.
Which, forces us to ask, why on earth would Paul silence her? Technically, she is offering free, entirely accurate public relations.
Right, like if you're trying to start a movement, you want the local oracle validating your message to the public.
Exactly. I'd be like, yes, tell everyone.
But the source of the testimony is paramount here. You cannot mix a message of spiritual liberation with a system of spiritual exploitation.
Oh, I see.
If Paul accepts her endorsement, he intertwines the Christian gospel with local pagan spiritualism and demonic possession. He had to sever that connection to protect the purity of the message.
But by severing that connection and freeing this marginalized girl, he inadvertently drops a bomb on the local economy.
Oh, he absolutely crashes their market. The moment she is freed, her fortune-telling ability vanishes.
And her owner's lucrative revenue stream evaporates instantly.
Right. This is the profound recurring friction of this era. The message of spiritual freedom inevitably dismantles exploitative, profit-driven human systems.
And when human greed is threatened, the retaliation is incredibly swift and violent.
Yes. The owners are furious, but notice the brilliance of their malice. They don't drag Paul and Silas to the magistrates and say, these guys ruined our business.
Right, because there's no Roman law against exorcism.
Exactly. Instead, they weaponize cultural prejudice. They drag them into the public square and claim, these men, being Jews, are disturbing our city. They are teaching customs that are unlawful for us Romans to practice.
Wow. So they trigger the deep-seated anti-Jewish sentiment and the fierce Roman nationalism of the colony.
It is a masterclass in political framing. It incites a mob mentality instantly.
And the magistrates bypass every single tenet of Roman due process. There is no trial, no defense, no investigation.
None. They just order Paul and Silas to be stripped naked and severely beaten with wooden rods in front of the entire city.
And the brutality doesn't end in the public square. They are thrown into the local prison, and the jailer is given strict orders to secure them.
So he throws them into the inner prison, the deepest, darkest, most suffocating part of the dungeon.
And he locks their feet in the stocks.
And we have to understand what the stocks actually were in this context.
Yeah, they weren't just a wooden board to keep you from walking away, were they?
No, they were an instrument designed for maximum physical torture. They were designed with holes spaced widely apart to forcibly stretch the prisoner's legs into agonizing, unnatural positions.
So you have Paul and Silas. Their backs are shredded and bleeding from a severe caning, sitting on a filthy dirt floor, their legs cramped and stretched to the point of dislocation.
In pitch blackness. It is the ultimate recipe for psychological collapse.
They have been publicly humiliated, physically broken, and buried in the dark.
But instead of breaking, a profound psychological and spiritual shift happens.
Right, it's midnight, and they aren't screaming. They aren't cursing the magistrates.
No, they are praying and singing hymns of praise out loud.
Which is just wild to think about.
It is a stunning defiance of their circumstances. It perfectly mirrors that concept found in the ancient text of Job, which speaks of a God who provides songs in the night. Yeah, it proves that their internal faith was entirely untethered from their external comfort.
And the sound must have been utterly alien in that environment. The depths of a Roman prison were places of despair, groaning, and madness.
To hear joyful singing echoing off those stone walls, it's no wonder the text notes that all the other prisoners were just listening to them.
But then, the singing is interrupted by a catastrophic earthquake. The foundations of the prison are shaken, the heavy doors fly open, and the chains literally fall off every single prisoner.
And this brings us to the jailer. When he wakes up and sees the doors wide open, his immediate reaction is driven entirely by Roman military law.
Because under Roman law, a guard who allowed his prisoners to escape assumed their sentences.
Exactly. He was facing certain execution, and likely a highly dishonorable one.
So, assuming all the prisoners have fled into the night, he draws his sword to take his own life, which was considered the only honorable exit in that culture.
And this is where Paul's empathy is just staggering. Think about the power dynamic here.
Yeah, the man holding the sword to his own chest is the exact same man who ruthlessly clamped Paul's bleeding legs into the torture stocks just hours earlier.
Right. If Paul wants revenge, he just has to stay silent for 10 seconds.
But he shouts out from the darkness, "Do not harm yourself, for we are all here."
He extends an unbelievable covering of grace to his own tormentor, and the psychological impact of that mercy completely breaks the jailer.
He calls for torches, rushes into the inner cell, and collapses, trembling at their feet.
He brings them outside and asks one of the most famous questions in history. "Sirs, what must I do to be saved?"
Now, a lot of people might look at that and think, well, he just survived an earthquake and almost lost his prisoners. He's just asking how to save his life or his career.
Yeah, it's easy to read it that way.
But it feels like the trauma of the night woke him up to something much bigger than Roman law.
Absolutely. The concept of being saved here operates on a profound dual level.
How so?
On one hand, he just felt the earth tear open. He recognizes these men are connected to a terrifyingly real higher power, and he wants to know how to be preserved from that divine wrath.
Right.
But on a deeper level, the unmerited grace Paul just showed him has laid his own conscience bare. He needs healing from the internal disease of his own cruelty and sin.
And Paul doesn't give him a 10-point theological checklist. He just says, believe in the Lord Jesus and you will be saved, you and your household.
It is a message of immediate access. They explain the teachings to him right there in the middle of the night.
And what follows is a deeply moving reversal of roles.
Yeah, the jailer, who hours ago was an agent of state-sanctioned torture, gently washes the wounds on their backs.
The early church father John Chrysostom had a brilliant observation about this. He pointed out the beautiful irony that the jailer washed the physical wounds with water, and in turn, the jailer was washed of his sins through the waters of baptism.
That's a great way to put it. He and his entire family are baptized right then and there.
And the emotional atmosphere completely transforms.
Right. Oh, totally. The text uses a very specific Greek word to describe the jailer's reaction, a galeao, which translates to a profound, leaping, almost inexpressible spiritual joy.
He brings them into his home and feeds them. He goes from suicidal despair to transcendent joy in a matter of hours.
But the sun eventually rises, and the political reality of what the magistrates did the day before is still waiting for them.
Yeah, morning comes and the magistrates send the police down to the jailer with a simple message: let those men go.
They figure a severe beating and a night in the inner prison was more than enough to terrify these traveling preachers into leaving town quietly.
The jailer is thrilled, obviously. He relays the message to Paul: you're free to go in peace.
But Paul refuses to leave.
And this is where Paul drops that secret legal trump card we talked about at the very beginning of the deep dive.
Oh, it's such a brilliant move.
He tells the police, they have beaten us publicly, uncondemned, men who are Roman citizens, and have thrown us into prison, and do they now throw us out secretly? No. Let them come themselves and take us out.
And the weight of that statement cannot be overstated. Under the Valerian and Porcian laws of the Roman Empire, it was a severe crime to bind or beat a Roman citizen without a formal trial and conviction.
Doing so could result in the magistrates being stripped of their office, right?
Their property confiscated and potentially facing execution themselves. Rome did not tolerate the violation of its citizens' rights.
So when the police report back that Paul and Silas are Roman citizens, the magistrates are absolutely terrified.
Oh, they are panicking.
But it makes you wonder, why on earth did Paul wait? If he had this get-out-of-jail-free card in his pocket the whole time, why endure the public humiliation, the shredded back, and the torture stock?
Yeah, why not shout, "I'm a Roman citizen," before the first blow landed?
Exactly.
Because if he had invoked his citizenship the day before, he absolutely would have spared himself the physical agony. The magistrates would have likely just escorted him out of the city limits immediately.
Oh, wait, I see where this is going.
Right. That would have left behind Lydia, the jailer, and this tiny, vulnerable new group of believers to face the unchecked wrath of those corrupt politicians.
Oh, wow. So by taking the beating illegally, he essentially takes the magistrates hostage.
Exactly. He completely inverts the power dynamic. By waiting until the illegal punishment was already inflicted, he forces the magistrates into a corner.
They have to come down to the prison personally, apologize to the men they tortured, and formally escort them out of the city.
It's an absolute masterstroke of leadership.
Mm.
Paul weaponizes his own suffering to create a political shield for the new church.
Because the magistrates are going to be far too terrified of a Roman inquiry to ever lay a finger on Lydia or the jailer after Paul leaves.
He secured their safety with his own blood. And even then, Paul dictates the terms of his exit. He doesn't rush out of the city.
Right. He walks straight back to Lydia's house, meets with the new believers, encourages them, and only then does he depart on his own timeline.
It perfectly cements the foundation of a community that would eventually become one of Paul's most beloved churches.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a completely new thread to pull on. Look at the sheer diversity of the people who were swept up in this narrative.
Yeah, it's incredibly varied.
In a matter of days, this single movement completely reorganized the lives of a wealthy, elite businesswoman, an exploited, marginalized slave girl, and a blue-collar Roman government worker.
It really spans the entire social spectrum.
It does. And it makes you wonder, if this early faith possessed the raw power to shatter socioeconomic boundaries, specifically because it was pushed to the margins and forged in the darkest, most oppressive prisons.
What happens when it becomes the establishment?
Exactly. What happens centuries later when a faith like that eventually becomes the ruling power of the empire itself? Does it maintain that transformative power, or does it become the very system it once challenged?
That is a fascinating tension to consider.
It really is. Something to think about as you go about your day. Thank you so much for exploring these historical records with us, and God blesses all the listeners. We will see you next time.